When a billionaire discovered that a barefoot girl living on the streets had been secretly teaching her daughter behind the school fence, she didn't call security. She didn't demand answers. What she did instead would shake the entire city and remind everyone watching that sometimes the people we overlook are exactly the ones sent to save us. This is about the moment when a woman who had everything realized she had been missing the one thing that mattered most. And it all began with a whisper through a fence. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Who was this girl sleeping under kiosks and eating from trash bins, yet somehow possessing knowledge that captivated the mind of a child born into wealth? How did she end up behind that fence every afternoon, pressing mathematics and science through the gaps in the metal while other homeless youth fought over scraps? And what would make a billionaire businesswoman, known for her ruthless efficiency and calculating mind, to abandon a board meeting the moment she learned what was happening between these two children? The answer lies not in the streets of Chicago where this story unfolds, but in the quiet desperation of two souls who found each other across an impossible divide. One child trapped behind golden gates but starving for genuine connection. Another trapped behind nothing but air, yet rich with purpose and dreams that refused to die no matter how many nights she spent shivering under the elevated train tracks. Their meeting wasn't coincidence. It was collision. And the impact would transform lives in ways no one could have predicted. Her name was Aaliyah, 15 years old. Hair matted, clothes that hadn't been properly washed in months, feet bare against cold concrete even in October. She slept where she could find shelter, a different doorway each night, always moving before business owners arrived in the morning to chase her away. Her mother, Denise, had been beautiful once. Aaliyah remembered that from when she was small, before the voices started, before the paranoia consumed everything. Now Denise wandered the same 3 blocks downtown, talking to people who weren't there, convinced the government was poisoning the water supply, occasionally recognizing her daughter but mostly looking through her as if she were glass. They had been on the streets for 7 years. Aaliyah had been 8 when they lost the apartment, when her mother's mental illness finally cost her the cleaning job that had barely kept them afloat. No family came forward. Denise's parents had died years earlier. Her sister had moved to Phoenix and changed her number. The system tried to separate them twice. Aaliyah ran both times, choosing hunger with her mother over safety without her. She learned early that the world reserves its cruelest judgments for the invisible poor, that people would step over her mother's sleeping body without breaking stride, that being homeless as a black girl meant being seen as dangerous, disposable, or both. But Aaliyah had a secret that kept her alive when everything else told her to give up. She loved learning with a passion that bordered on religious. Before they lost their home, she had been the brightest student in her elementary school. Teachers said she was gifted, that she could be anything she wanted. Then the streets swallowed those dreams. Yet somehow she kept learning. She collected discarded newspapers and read every word. She memorized facts from magazines left in coffee shops. When the public library opened, she was first inside, staying until security made her leave, absorbing everything she could before returning to the darkness outside. At 13 she discovered the fence. It ran along the west side of Preston Academy, one of Chicago's most exclusive private schools. The building was beautiful, all red brick and white columns with manicured lawns and windows that actually sparkled. Aaliyah would press her face between the metal links and watch students her age moving between classes, carrying books that probably cost more than everything she owned. She felt envy, yes, but more than that she felt hunger. Not for food, though she was always hungry for that too. But hunger to be in those classrooms, to raise her hand and answer questions, to be part of something larger than survival. She started coming every day after the lunch period, watching through the fence as students filed outside for recess. Most ignored her completely. A few made cruel jokes. One boy threw a half-eaten sandwich at her face and laughed when she scrambled to pick it up and eat it anyway. But then, about 18 months ago, she noticed a girl who didn't laugh. A girl who watched Aaliyah with curious, intelligent eyes. A girl who seemed just as lonely despite being surrounded by privilege. Her name was Sydney. She was 13 then, daughter of Victoria Chin, one of the most powerful businesswomen in Chicago. Victoria owned a commercial real estate empire worth $300 million. She sat on corporate boards. Her face appeared in business magazines. She donated to the right charities and attended the right galas. And she had one child, born after years of fertility treatments, raised by a rotation of nannies while Victoria built her empire. Sydney attended Preston Academy because that's where powerful people sent their children. She had everything money could buy. Everything except the thing she wanted most. Sydney was struggling in school. Not because she wasn't smart, but because she couldn't focus. The pressure crushed her. Her mother's expectations felt like weights chained to her ankles. Every B grade meant a lecture about not living up to her potential. Every mistake meant disappointment in her mother's eyes. She had tutors, of course. Expensive ones. But they taught her facts without joy, drilled her in subjects without showing her why anything mattered. Sydney was drowning in privilege, gasping for something real. One day, frustrated after failing another math quiz, Sydney walked to the back fence during recess instead of joining the other students. She kicked at the grass and muttered to herself. That's when Aaliyah spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, tentative, but clear. She said that mathematics wasn't about memorizing formulas. It was about seeing patterns in the world. She explained a concept about fractions using the fence itself, the way the repeating shapes created ratios. Sydney stopped and listened. For the first time in months, something clicked in her mind. After that, Sydney came to the fence every day. Aaliyah would be waiting. They never acknowledged what was happening, never gave it a name. But Sydney would bring her homework and Aaliyah would help her understand it. Not by giving answers, but by breaking down concepts until they made sense. Aaliyah had a gift for teaching, perhaps because everything she knew had been won through desperate effort. She understood confusion because she had fought through it alone. And Sydney responded to this patience, this genuine care for her understanding rather than just her performance. For months, this continued in secret. Sydney's grades improved dramatically. Her teachers noticed but assumed the expensive tutors had finally broken through. Victoria noticed too, pleased that her daughter was finally living up to expectations, though she never asked what had changed. She was too busy with her empire to look deeper. And Sydney kept coming to the fence, developing something she had never experienced before. Not just academic improvement but friendship. Connection with someone who saw her as Sydney, not as Victoria Chen's daughter, not as a walking investment in the future. Aaliyah treasured those afternoon sessions. They gave her day structure and purpose. She would spend mornings at the library preparing lessons, thinking about how to explain concepts clearly. She studied Sydney's textbooks through the fence, staying 2 chapters ahead. Teaching made her feel human again, reminded her that she had value beyond what society saw when they looked at her dirty clothes and bare feet. Sydney had started bringing extra food in her lunch, always leaving it near the fence where Aaliyah could reach through and take it. Not charity exactly. Just sharing. The way friends do. But secrets in a place like Preston Academy don't stay hidden forever. There are too many eyes, too many students looking for something to gossip about. It was a boy named Connor Fitzgerald who first noticed Sydney spending every recess at the back fence instead of with the other students. He followed her one day, crouching behind the maintenance shed to watch. When he saw Sydney pushing homework through the fence to a homeless girl, saw them huddled together learning, he couldn't believe his luck. This was gold. He pulled out his phone and started recording. By that evening, the video was everywhere. Connor had posted it to his private social media with a mocking caption about Sydney getting tutored by a street rat. His friends shared it. Their parents saw it. Within hours, it reached the Preston Academy parent network. Questions erupted. How long had this been happening? Was the school aware? Was this homeless girl dangerous? Why was she allowed anywhere near the students? The fear wasn't really about safety, of course. It was about contamination. About their perfect, controlled environment being touched by poverty's reality. The headmaster, Dr. Lawrence Patterson, received 17 calls before 9 that night. All from influential parents. All demanding answers and action. He called an emergency meeting with his security team. They reviewed surveillance footage and confirmed that yes, this had been happening for months, somehow under their noses. The homeless girl appeared on camera almost daily, always at the same section of fence. The school's security had missed it because she never tried to enter the grounds, never caused disturbance. She simply existed at the boundary, and one of their students had chosen to cross that boundary, at least in spirit. Dr. Patterson scheduled a meeting with Victoria Chen for the following morning. This conversation required delicacy. Victoria was on the board of trustees. Her donations funded the science wing. But her daughter had been secretly consorting with a homeless teenager, and the other parents were demanding consequences. He prepared carefully, rehearsing how to frame this as concern for Sydney's safety and well-being rather than snobbery. He knew Victoria's reputation. She could be cold when challenged, ruthless when protecting what was hers. This would not be an easy conversation. Victoria arrived at Preston Academy at 8 in the morning, walking through doors she had funded with a check that had more zeros than most people see in their lives. She sat across from Dr. Patterson in his mahogany-paneled office, her expression unreadable behind designer glasses. He showed her the video, explained the situation, expressed concern about security protocols and appropriate boundaries, suggested Sydney might benefit from additional counseling to understand why she had sought connection in such an inappropriate place. Victoria watched the video 3 times without speaking. Her face revealed nothing. When Dr. Patterson finished talking, Victoria asked only one question. Where is this girl now? Dr. Patterson seemed confused. The homeless girl? Yes, Victoria said. Where does she go when she leaves the fence? He admitted he didn't know. Somewhere in the neighborhood, presumably. There were several areas where homeless populations congregated. Victoria stood up then, the meeting clearly over in her mind. She told Dr. Patterson she would handle this personally. He started to protest, to suggest that perhaps it would be better to simply increase security and ensure the homeless girl couldn't return, but something in Victoria's expression stopped him. She left without another word. Victoria didn't go to her office that morning. She didn't call her assistant to clear her schedule. Instead, she sat in her car outside Preston Academy for 20 minutes, watching the video again on her phone. Really watching it this time, not through the lens of embarrassment or social concern, but as a mother. She saw her daughter's face as she listened to this homeless girl explain a concept. Sydney was engaged, focused, genuinely interested. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she had seen her daughter's face light up that way. Couldn't remember the last real conversation they'd had that wasn't about grades or expectations or disappointment. Something cracked in Victoria's chest. Something she had kept carefully sealed for years. She had built an empire, yes. She had power and wealth beyond most people's imagination. But when was the last time she had really seen her daughter? When had she stopped being a mother and become just a demanding boss? And this girl, this homeless teenager who should have been broken by life, had somehow given Sydney what Victoria's money couldn't buy. Had seen her daughter as a person worth investing time in, worth teaching, worth caring about. If this story has your heart racing, comment, I'm still watching. Let's see who's truly following till the end. Victoria made a decision then that would change everything. But first she needed to see this girl for herself. Needed to understand who she was beyond the label of homeless teenager. She called her driver and told him to take her to the locations near Preston Academy where homeless populations were known to gather. They spent 2 hours searching. Finally, near the Roosevelt Road subway station, Victoria spotted her. Aaliyah was sitting against a brick wall, reading a battered paperback book about chemistry, her bare feet tucked under her to preserve warmth. Her mother sat 10 feet away, muttering to invisible threats. Victoria told her driver to wait and approached on foot. She stood over Aaliyah for a full minute before the girl noticed her presence. When Aaliyah looked up, she recognized Victoria immediately from the school pickup she had observed countless times through the fence. Her first instinct was to run. Adults who sought out homeless teenagers rarely had good intentions. But something in Victoria's face stopped her. Not pity. Not disgust. Something harder to define. Curiosity maybe. Or recognition. Victoria asked if she could sit down. Aaliyah nodded, mute with confusion. Victoria sat on the cold concrete in her $1,000 suit and looked at this girl who had been teaching her daughter. Up close, Aaliyah was younger than she appeared in the video. 15, maybe 16, but with eyes years older. Her clothes were filthy, held together with safety pins. Her hair needed cutting and serious conditioning. But her hands were clean, nails trimmed short. And the book she held was filled with careful handwritten notes in the margins. Victoria asked why she had been teaching Sydney. Aaliyah's answer was simple and devastating. Because she asked me to help her. Because I could. Because it felt good to be useful for something besides taking up space and breathing air. Victoria absorbed this, then asked what Aaliyah wanted from life if she could have anything. Aaliyah laughed at that, a bitter sound. She wanted to go to school. To learn properly instead of stealing knowledge from libraries and trash bins. To become a teacher someday and show other kids that learning could be beautiful instead of painful. To help her mother get medical care. To sleep in a bed. Small dreams for most people. Impossible dreams for her. Victoria was quiet for a long time after that. Aaliyah expected her to leave then, maybe hand over some cash to ease her conscience. That's what rich people did when confronted with poverty. They threw money at it and walked away feeling virtuous. But Victoria didn't leave. Instead, she looked at Aaliyah's mother, who was now rocking back and forth and talking about radio waves in her teeth. She asked what had happened. Aaliyah told her the abbreviated version. Mental illness. Lost job. Lost home. System failures. 7 years of survival. Victoria listened without interrupting, without offering meaningless reassurances that everything would be okay. Then Victoria asked something unexpected. She asked if Aaliyah would be willing to accept help. Real help. Not just money but intervention that could actually change their situation. Aaliyah had learned to be suspicious of such offers. They usually came with strings that strangled you. But something in Victoria's direct gaze, in the way she hadn't flinched from the reality of their situation, made Aaliyah consider it. She asked what kind of help. Victoria said honestly that she didn't know yet, but she wanted to figure it out. She wanted Aaliyah to have a chance at the life she deserved. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria did something she had never done before. She stepped away from her empire to focus on something that wouldn't increase her profit margins. She hired a lawyer who specialized in family services to navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of getting Denise into appropriate mental health care. She found a psychiatric hospital that didn't treat poor patients like problems to be managed. She personally met with the director and arranged for Denise to be admitted into a long-term treatment program that would actually address her illness instead of just medicating her into silence. The day they took Denise to the hospital, Aaliyah broke down completely. She had kept her mother safe for 7 years through sheer will. Letting her go, even into care that could help her, felt like betrayal. Victoria sat with her through the panic attack, not offering empty comfort but just being present. When Aaliyah could breathe again, Victoria told her something that surprised them both. She said that watching Aaliyah fight for her mother reminded her of what parenting was supposed to look like. Reminded her that her daughter needed more than money and expectations. She needed someone who saw her. For Aaliyah, Victoria arranged something more complicated. A good foster placement was difficult given her age and history of running away. So Victoria did something unprecedented. She petitioned to become Aaliyah's legal guardian. The process was complex and raised eyebrows in Chicago's elite circles. People questioned her motives, suggested it was performative charity or guilty conscience. But Victoria pressed forward with the same determination she brought to hostile business takeovers. Within 6 weeks, she had navigated the legal system and brought Aaliyah into her home. That first night, Aaliyah stood in the bedroom Victoria had prepared for her and couldn't process what she was seeing. A real bed with clean sheets. A desk with actual supplies. A closet filled with clothes in her size, nothing fancy but clean and warm. A bathroom connected to the bedroom with hot water and soap and towels that didn't smell like mildew. Victoria left her alone to adjust. Aaliyah sat on the floor for 2 hours before she could bring herself to touch anything, convinced it would all disappear if she allowed herself to believe it was real. Sydney's reaction to all of this was complicated. Part of her was thrilled. Her friend, the girl who had helped her understand herself as much as her homework, was now living under the same roof. But part of her felt displaced, worried that her mother's attention, so rarely given, would now be divided. Victoria handled this carefully. She sat both girls down and explained that this wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about expanding what family could mean. Sydney was her daughter, always would be. But Aaliyah needed help, and they had the resources to provide it. She asked Sydney if she could accept that. Sydney looked at Aaliyah then, really looked at her in clean clothes with her hair washed and pulled back, looking younger and more vulnerable than she ever had behind the fence. Sydney remembered every patient explanation, every moment when Aaliyah had made her feel capable instead of stupid. She remembered the extra food always left by the fence, the way Aaliyah never made her feel guilty for having what she had. Sydney said yes. She could accept it. More than that, she wanted it. She told her mother that Aaliyah had been teaching her more than school subjects. She had been teaching her what it meant to care about something beyond yourself. The first few months were adjustment for everyone. Aaliyah struggled with constant fear that it would end, that she would wake up back on the street. She had nightmares about her mother being hurt in the hospital, about Victoria changing her mind. She hoarded food under her bed until Victoria found it and gently explained that there would always be more, that she never had to be afraid of hunger again. Those conversations broke something open in Aaliyah, allowed her to begin grieving everything she had lost and accepting what she was being given. Victoria struggled too, though in different ways. She had built her life around control and achievement. Aaliyah's trauma couldn't be solved with contracts and determination. The girl needed time, needed patience, needed permission to heal at her own pace. Victoria had to learn how to be present without fixing, how to offer support without demanding specific outcomes. It went against everything her business instincts told her. But she kept trying, kept showing up, kept choosing to be the kind of mother both girls needed. Sydney watched her mother transform and felt something shift in their relationship too. Victoria started coming home earlier, having dinners with them instead of working through the night. She asked about their days and actually listened to the answers. She helped with homework not by hiring tutors but by sitting at the table with them, admitting when she didn't know something, learning alongside them. The house that had always felt like a museum began to feel like a home. Aaliyah enrolled at Preston Academy after winter break. Victoria personally walked her through registration, making it clear to Dr. Patterson that Aaliyah would be treated with the same respect as every other student. Some students whispered. Some parents complained. But most were curious about this girl who had somehow earned Victoria Chen's protection. Aaliyah was terrified that first day, convinced everyone could see through her new clothes to the street kid underneath. But Sydney stayed close, introduced her around, made it clear they were family now. The real surprise came 3 months into Aaliyah living with Victoria. They had established something like routine by then. Aaliyah was thriving academically, her teachers stunned by how quickly she absorbed everything. Sydney's confidence had blossomed with Aaliyah as a sister rather than just a teacher. Victoria had learned to balance her empire with actual presence in her home. Everything seemed to be settling into a new normal. Then Denise's psychiatrist called with news. Denise was responding well to treatment. Her psychosis was being managed with the right combination of medication and therapy. She was stable for the first time in years. She was asking to see her daughter. The psychiatrist believed supervised visits would be beneficial for both of them. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. She had known this was coming eventually, but she had allowed herself to imagine it would be much further in the future. Denise was Aaliyah's mother. Biology and love existed in that relationship even if mental illness had damaged it. Victoria had no legal right to prevent contact, and wouldn't have if she could. But she was terrified of losing Aaliyah now that she had found her. She sat Aaliyah down that evening and delivered the news carefully. Aaliyah's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She sobbed with relief that her mother was better, guilt that she had left her, fear about seeing her again, hope that maybe they could be a real family. Victoria held her through all of it, whispering reassurances even as her own heart broke at the thought of Aaliyah leaving. When Aaliyah could speak again, she asked Victoria something that revealed how deeply their bond had grown. She asked if Victoria would come with her to see her mother. Not as a guardian figure but as support. As family. The visit happened on a Saturday morning. Victoria drove them to the hospital, Aaliyah silent in the passenger seat, Sydney in the back having refused to stay home. The psychiatric facility was nothing like the horror stories Aaliyah had feared. It was clean, well-staffed, focused on actual healing rather than just containment. They met Denise in a common room with large windows and comfortable furniture. She was 42 but looked both younger and older than that. Younger because the constant stress of street survival had been lifted. Older because her eyes held the weight of everything she had put her daughter through. Denise cried when she saw Aaliyah. Real tears, not the confused grief that used to cloud her face. She apologized, words tumbling out about knowing she had failed, knowing Aaliyah deserved better, being so proud of the woman her daughter was becoming despite her mother's illness. Aaliyah forgave her instantly, completely. She had never blamed her mother for being sick, only the world for not caring enough to help. They talked for an hour, carefully rebuilding connection, while Victoria and Sydney sat nearby giving them space but remaining present. Before they left, Denise asked to speak with Victoria privately. Sydney took Aaliyah to get coffee from the cafeteria, sensing the adults needed time. Denise thanked Victoria for saving her daughter, for giving Aaliyah everything she couldn't provide. Victoria started to deflect, to say she was just doing what anyone would do, but Denise stopped her. She said that wasn't true. Most people had stepped over them for 7 years. Most people had treated them like garbage to be ignored. Victoria had seen Aaliyah's value and acted on it. That wasn't common decency. That was extraordinary. Then Denise said something that shattered Victoria's carefully maintained composure. She said that when she recovered fully, when the doctors cleared her to leave, she had no intention of asking for Aaliyah back. Not because she didn't love her daughter, but because she did. Aaliyah had a chance at a real life now. Education. Stability. A future beyond survival. Denise had been given the gift of watching her daughter thrive from a distance, of knowing she was safe and loved and becoming everything she was meant to be. She wouldn't destroy that by insisting on custody she wasn't ready for and might never be. Victoria wept then. Actual tears in front of a woman she barely knew. She admitted she had been terrified of this moment, of losing Aaliyah just when they had formed a family. But more than that, she was humbled. Denise, who had every right to be bitter about everything life had taken from her, was choosing her daughter's well-being over her own wants. Was demonstrating the kind of selfless love that Victoria had once thought only existed in movies. Here was a woman the world called crazy, showing more wisdom and grace than most of the powerful people Victoria dealt with every day. Denise asked Victoria for one promise. That she would let Aaliyah keep visiting, keep being part of her mother's recovery. That she wouldn't cut Denise out completely once the legal guardianship became permanent. Victoria agreed immediately. They would come every week as often as Denise wanted. Aaliyah would know both her mothers, the one who gave her life and the one who gave her a future. They would figure out how to be an unconventional family together. That conversation changed something fundamental in Victoria. She had approached Aaliyah's situation as a problem to solve, an injustice to correct. But Denise helped her understand it as something more profound. This wasn't charity. This was the universe giving her a chance to become the person she was meant to be. To parent with her whole heart instead of just her bank account. To understand that real wealth wasn't measured in profit margins but in connection, in showing up, in choosing love even when it was complicated and messy. How would you feel if you were in Victoria's position? If a stranger's child taught you what your own heart had been missing? Drop a comment and let us know. 1 year passed. Then 2. Aaliyah graduated from Preston Academy at the top of her class, delivering a valedictorian speech that had half the audience in tears. She talked about learning that worth isn't determined by circumstances, that knowledge is the one thing poverty can never truly steal, that family is built through choice as much as blood. She thanked Victoria and Sydney by name, called them her sisters in every way that mattered. She thanked her mother Denise, sitting in the audience in her first public appearance after being released to outpatient care, for teaching her resilience even in the darkest times. Aaliyah received a full scholarship to Northwestern University. She planned to study education and psychology, wanting to work with homeless youth and prove that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. Sydney, now 15 and flourishing in her own right, had decided she wanted to follow a similar path. The girls who met through a chain-link fence were now planning to change the world together, one overlooked kid at a time. But the real twist came not from Aaliyah's success, which was remarkable but perhaps expected given her intelligence and determination. It came from what Victoria did with her empire. She had continued running her businesses successfully, but her priorities had fundamentally shifted. She used her wealth and influence to establish the Aaliyah Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to identify and support homeless youth with academic potential. Not just with money but with mentorship, housing support, mental health services and educational opportunities. The program started in Chicago but expanded rapidly. Within 3 years, it was operating in 12 cities, reaching thousands of young people who had been written off by society. Victoria poured millions into it, but more importantly, she poured herself into it. She met with the kids personally, heard their stories, connected them with resources. She became known not for her real estate empire but for her advocacy for the homeless population, particularly families destroyed by mental illness and poverty. Critics said she was trying to ease her guilt or buy redemption. Some claimed it was all for publicity. But the people who worked closest to Victoria knew the truth. She had been changed profoundly by knowing Aaliyah and Denise. Had been broken open and rebuilt into someone who understood that privilege meant responsibility, that wealth meant nothing if you died rich but empty. She told an interviewer once that Aaliyah had taught her daughter algebra, but taught her how to be human. That wasn't charity. That was salvation. Denise made a full recovery as much as anyone fully recovers from severe mental illness. She moved into her own apartment, maintained on medication and therapy, and worked part-time at the Aaliyah Initiative helping other parents navigate the mental health system. She and Aaliyah had rebuilt their relationship into something different than before but no less real. They had Sunday dinners together at Victoria's house. The 4 of them gathered around a table as an unconventional family that somehow worked perfectly. Sydney, for her part, had become Aaliyah's fiercest advocate and closest friend. The loneliness that had once defined her had been replaced by purpose. She volunteered with the initiative, tutored homeless kids, used her privilege as a weapon against the systems that tried to keep them down. She told her mother once that meeting Aaliyah behind that fence had saved her life too, though in a different way. Had shown her what really mattered before she wasted her whole life chasing the wrong things. The fence at Preston Academy still stood, of course. But it meant something different now. Victoria had donated money to establish a community learning garden on the school's border, transforming the barrier into a place where students and neighborhood kids could interact, learn together, break down the walls between privilege and poverty. Every spring, students planted vegetables that were donated to homeless shelters. Every fall, they harvested lessons about compassion and connection. 5 years after that first conversation through the fence, Aaliyah graduated from Northwestern with her teaching degree and a minor in social work. She was 23, beautiful in her cap and gown, holding her diploma like it was made of light. Victoria and Sydney sat in the audience beside Denise, all three women crying with pride. After the ceremony, reporters asked Aaliyah what she had learned from her incredible journey from homelessness to here. Her answer was simple. She said she learned that the world tells us who deserves help and who doesn't, who matters and who's invisible. But that those categories are lies designed to make comfortable people feel okay about inequality. Every person she met on the streets had value, had stories, had potential being wasted. She said she learned that sometimes the person who looks like they have nothing is actually the richest person you'll ever meet, if you're brave enough to look past their circumstances to their soul. She said she learned that family isn't just blood and legal documents, though those matter. Family is showing up. It's choosing to see someone when they're invisible. It's believing in potential before it has proof. This is the story of what happens when we choose to see people instead of categories. When we understand that worth isn't measured by bank accounts or addresses. When we let ourselves be changed by the people we think we're helping. Because Victoria saved Aaliyah from the streets. But Aaliyah saved Victoria from a life lived at the surface, from the empty success that looks impressive but means nothing. What would you have done if you were Victoria, looking at that video of your daughter learning from a homeless girl? Would you have seen a problem to eliminate or a person to know? If this story moved you, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling us what you felt, what you learned, what you do differently. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that there's still good in this world. And subscribe to our channel because we're not done telling stories that matter.